Okay, today we're going to look closely at the Contoso University example. And last time we looked at the data annotations that we set to make to generate foreign keys and relationships between the elements, the database tables and the classes. Today we're going to look at some of the code and some of the features of the code and exactly how that was implemented. We might not be able to get through all of it today, but we should get through a few of them anyhow. First thing I want to look at is departments. If we go to departments, there's a couple of things that shows that data that are related to the departments is stored in another table. For example, if we were to look at the model for departments, we see that there is a department ID, a name, a budget, a start date, and there is an instructor ID. The question mark means it's optional. There's a instructor ID, and there is an instructor object that's part of the department model. That indicates that there's a one-to-many relationship between department and instructor. All right. So a department points to one instructor. The way this is set up, an instructor could actually be in several departments. Whether that's the case or not, remains to be seen. At any rate, it's a one-to-many relationship, and there can be for each department there's going to be an instructor ID, foreign key, and there will be related to one instructor object. So the first thing I want to show you is on the department index page. So if we go and run this and we look at this, under departments, notice that it shows the name of the administrator. That doesn't come from the department table. That is in the department model, however. That is the foreign key that points to the instructor who is the administrator for that particular department. All right, so we're going to look at that first. The other thing we're going to look at is similar thing happens here on the details page. We will look at that. The edit page has a drop down where we can select who is the administrator for that department. If we delete it, it shows the administrator as well. And finally, if we create new, there is a drop down that we can enter data in, and without knowing the instructor ID, we can select the instructor that is the administrator of this department. So we're going to start off with all the things associated with department, and we'll see how we go from there. All right, so let's look at the code that is on the index for this. So we look at the department index. We're going to look first at the model, and then we are going to look at the CSS243, the Razor page. The model has associated with it an iList of department. And if you notice, what we're doing is we're grabbing the departments. Previously, we would have seen this part of it to grab the departments. Underscore context.department.toList async. But because we want to include the administrator for the department, we are going to do this. We're going to include D goes to D.administrator. We're going to take each department and pull the administrator that is related to that department. So we're going to follow that foreign key and pull the instructor who is the administrator for that department. So if you want to include data from the related tables, you can use an include statement to include those. And you simply use, I believe those are called navigation properties to go through one entity to get to information in a related entity. If we look at the Razor page itself, we get the title, the display name for Model Department Sub-Zero Administrator. That simply gives the column title. And then we say this. For the model item, for each of the model items, there's a loop here for each var item in model department. For each department that is in that list of departments, we want the administrator's full name. And because the administrator is an instructor, we're going to pull that information from the instructor model and the instructor entity who has a computed column for full name, which simply concatenates the last name, comma, and the first name. So when we run it, we get where it exists for a given department. There's a title that comes from the name of that field. We can look at the model and see that. And then finally, the full name, which is last name, comma, first name from the instructor that's related to this department. All right, fairly simple and straightforward. We're going to see things like this elsewhere too. If we look at instructors, for example, no, not necessarily there. Look at courses. Courses have a similar thing with department. All right, so they pull the department that's related to it. If you looked at the code for this, it would be very similar to this, the departments. All right, let's now look at to create a new. Actually, we're going to look at edit first. And the add and the add should be very, actually, no, it's been such a crazy day. I am having trouble thinking. We're going to look at the details first. The details shows the name of the administrator. All right. Notice it only shows the first name. So how does that work? Well, again, let's close these down. And let's look at the department details. We're going to first look at the model, then we're going to look at the Razor page. Notice this is displaying a detail about one department. Therefore, you do not have a list of departments. You simply have a single department object that this model has. So this model is going to retrieve the one department that we want. How do we know which department we want? We're going to get passed from the form an ID. All right, that's what this says. We look at the list, the link for detail says that we're passing the department ID. All right. Looking at the details again, we are including the administrator, and we are using first or default async. There should only be one row in the database that has a given ID, but so it is going to pull either the first one, or if none exists, it will pull a default. But this will typically always pull just exactly one, because we wouldn't have the ID to pass to it if that ID didn't exist. And given that that's the primary key, there can't be more than one. If for whatever reason the department was null, we return that it's not found. Otherwise, we return the page. Again, we're using the include to include data from the administrator. That is the instructor entity. Notice how these are chained. This dot include dot first or default, and then we have the where clause. What used to be the where clause. So what this will give us is this will give us one single department in which the administrator is populated, and that one department is going to be the department that matches the ID. Let's look at the details page. And the details page displays the name for administrator, and it returns the first and middle name of the administrator. That's why I did not display the full name. And again, we use the dot notation to get it. If we were to look at delete, it would be virtually the same way. Look at the model. There's a single department. We're including administrator, first or default. As no tracking, let's see what that says. Returns a new query where the change tracker will not track any of the entities that are returned. That would be if if there was someone changing the database and changing the value for something while you were running this query. All right. And again, same kind of thing. And the delete displays it the same way. Only difference is we're displaying the full name again here. All right. That takes us through the delete, the details, and the index. Let's look now at the create and edit. So I'm going to start looking at the create. And again, I'm going to look at the model first. And then the razor page. So what the model says is we have a department. Again, we are inserting a single department. We're not inserting multiple departments from this screen. On post async means that when this page is posted to, we are going to look to see if if anyone else is editing that particular department or inserting the particular department at the same time, which would be unlikely. If it is, we're going to remove that department, and then we're going to change the save the changes. And then we redirect to the page. So department row version is from the entity that was fetched. If it doesn't match the DB, concurrency exception is thrown. So if it doesn't match this would be, oh, my mistake. I'm looking at the delete. What it's doing is it's looking to see my mistake. If it's looking to see if the if the, no wonder I was confused. I thought this was the insert, is looking to make sure that someone else isn't editing this, because if they are editing this, it's looking to see if that does exist. And if it is, it's looking and it will remove it and not, if it's not that, if it doesn't throw a concurrency exception, it will go and remove it from the list of departments. So you end up, deleting it. All right, let's try this again with the insert. All right, let's look at the model here. All right, with this, we have a method, view data instructor ID, and that is a new select list from the instructors that includes the ID as the first field and the first and middle name as the data. Remember, with the dropdown, with the select list, comes from a table. We are going to have what we want to store as the value of the select list, and what we're going to show as a display value. So it puts it in this place called view data. View data is used to pass data between the model, and is one way to pass data between the model and the GUI. So it puts out there in something called instructor ID a new select list. Therefore, when we go in here and look for this, we look for instructor ID, we have a select, ASP items, view bag dot instructors. I'm not sure why it doesn't just say view data, but one I think is a newer version of the other. In any case, it works, and it will pop in for the items for this, the list that is called instructor ID. So this drop down, which we have defined, is going to get put in the instructor ID of the department table, the result of it, and it gets the items in the drop down from there. All right, questions about that? If you do, let me know. Take the time to study this, play around with it, make a change and see what it affects. It's a good way to learn coding. The insert, I am guessing, or the edit, I'm guessing, works the same. Except, oh, I wanted to show you the create model again after we have posted to it on post async. We'll make sure that the validation has worked for the model. If not, we go back to the page. Otherwise, we go and add the department to the list of departments. We go and commit that change, and we go back to the index. The edit has almost the same thing. It pulls up the data from the department table, and it includes the administrator in there as well. And it creates a select list that way. Use strongly typed rather than view data. Again, this is just an alternate way of doing this. We define a select list called instructor name.sl. And if we look in the edit, we have sort of the same thing, except we say at model.instructorNameSL instead of view data. So I think what they're suggesting here is this is a preferred way to do it. I don't expect this to come easily for you. And it's okay to refer back to this example as you're doing the work, but just sort of try to understand what the example is doing. Come to me with any questions, and then try to do that in the stuff that you're working on. All right. So we got through departments. Let's look at the next thing that we're going to look at. Let's look at instructors. All right, with constructors, right? With instructors, we have something different. With a department, we had a single administrator. With the instructor, we have a list of courses that they teach. And if we select that course, it will show us details about that course. In other words, it says 2021 composition. It shows more information about it. If we select that, then we see the list of the students that are in that course. So this kind of has the ability to go down 3 levels deep simply by selecting a particular instructor. If we go and select this guy, it'll show the course they taught. If we click select here, it shows the students. So this will probably be enough for the rest of the class, because this is a little rest of the lecture period, because this is a little confusing. So let's take one step at a time. How do we get this list of courses in the instructor list? So let's again go to instructors. We're going to start out looking at the model and the CSS243. There is the instructor index data, which is something that's defined. We'll look at that in a minute, and it's called instructor data. We create an object called instructor data. We set the instructors as being the list of instructors from the context, that is from the database. We're going to include office assignments. We're going to include the course assignments. After we include these two, we're then going to include the course. Then we're going to include the department. So the relationship goes here, that the instructor is related to the course assignments. Then the course assignments are related to the course and to the department. And we're going to order by last name. And we're going to create a list to that. They have some code commented out. Be interesting to try that. I think it just goes one level deeper, so we don't really need to look at that. So initially, when the page loads, this is what we're getting. We're getting a list of all the instructors. For each instructor, we're getting the office assignment. For each instructor, we're getting a list of the courses that they teach. Now, initially, this is going to be false, and this is going to be false. When the page first loads, both the course ID and the ID are going to be null. So therefore, none of this takes place. None of this goes into playing. So what does this do? This goes and under courses, we have a loop. To loop for each item, and that item is a loop inside of a loop. Here we're looping through each instructors in that instructor data list. Then for each instructor, because this is a nested list, we're looping through to get the course assignments. And from that, we're getting the course ID and course title. The @ sign like this is simply a way of saying output these things. Sort of a shorthand. We have the @ sign here and here as well. So we loop through each instructor. Oh, the titles are hard coded. I thought I had missed that. For each instructor, we loop through. For each instructor, we loop through the list of their course assignments and display for the course assignment the related course ID and the related course title. So that's what is responsible for showing this, the list of courses for a professor. Now, let's see what happens when we press select. Select is going to call this, and it's going to pass the ID of the item. All right. What is the item? The item is the instructor. So this is going to pass. It's going to call itself back. It's calling the index back. And what is it passing it? It's passing it the ID of that instructor. So the model kicks in again. We do all this stuff, except this time, the ID is not null. And therefore we do this. We get the value of the ID. We say, give me the instructor, for an instructor, data. It's getting from the instructor the instructor that matches that ID. It's getting from that list of instructors that we created up here. And then it's pulling for that instructor, get the course assignments by selecting the courses related to that instructor. So now what happens is we have a second loop. If that is populated with courses, it's going to loop through and display data from the course. It's going to loop through every course that's in that collection, and it's going to display for it the course ID, and the other information. Course ID, title, and department name. And if we select that, then we're going to call it again, and it's going to call it and give it a course ID, in which case we pull for each course, we pull the course data and load up for each course in there, load up the students. We grab the selected course. We join that with the enrollments. And for each enrollment we go and we reference and get for that the list of students related to that enrollment record. And again, we loop through those and show the students, provided that that is not null. I realize this is confusing. I don't think there's anything I could do to make it less confusing. I'm trying my best to describe it in simple terms. But again, this is complicated stuff. It's different kind of coding than maybe you're used to seeing. So therefore, take the time to try to understand what I went through today. Go in the code and comment and describe what's going on here. For example, this over here is if select link for course was clicked. Because if that was clicked, then the course ID would not be null. This would be if select link for instructor clicked. A good exercise is to try to comment the code and put comments in that describe what's happening at each step of the process. I realize especially this link syntax is a little confusing. I think that's something we're going to review in the near future, and we'll review more functionality in this particular app, because I think this app contains a lot of what you might want to do for your project. It really has relationships between tables. It has multiple tables, multiple relationships between the tables. It has all of the relationships, one-to-one, many-to-many, and one-to-many. And it's a good model for you to use when you're thinking of your own application. Stay tuned to Canvas for updates about how the current campus security issue will affect this class. And do let me know if there's any questions. All right, take care. We'll talk to you later.